Hello, this is From Caracas and I am Ray Gomez. On the plan designed by the Bolivarian government in order to face the economic war in Venezuela, I will talk today with Luis Enrique Gavazut, a researcher in social sciences. Please join us for the next few minutes. How do you do, Luis Enrique?
Fine, thank you, Ray, for the invitation.
Thank you for accepting it. This plan comes into effect on August 20th. What are the reasons that boost this effect from this moment on?
Okay, Ray. This new package of economic measures that has implemented the Bolivarian government is very interesting and has prospects to help much to the economic recovery of Venezuela.
What is the situation that Venezuela is currently going through, taking into account that the Bolivarian government has been given the task of recovering the country economically speaking?
Basically, the Venezuelan economy has been subjected to a severe process of economic warfare, a speculative attack on the national currency, the bolivar, and at the same time a series of measures taken from abroad, especially by Washington, but also by other nations that constitute an economic and financial blockade against the Bolivarian government, and in some aspects of the republic itself, of the whole economy. So that introduced enormous difficulties in order to guarantee the normal development of the economy. This translates into a regretful situation of hyperinflation in the country with levels of scarcity of products, of important goods, that put us in a situation of stagflation. That means hyperinflation with recession from the point of view of the productive apparatus of the generation of goods.
And this hyperinflation is being translated into rising prices.
Of course, hyperinflation evidently represents a constant and excessive price hike. Venezuelans had never lived an experience like this. It's historical, because it's the first time in the country and has a determinant. It's complex, it's multicausal, but the weight of the factors of destabilization that use the economy as both political and geopolitical weapon is decisive, affecting our economy. Now, how do you attack that? How to attack the manipulation of the Venezuelan currency's exchange rate, which is the most important variable for price formation in Venezuela, because Venezuela is an economy that depends a lot of imports.
And why?
It depends a lot of imports because of our particular historical development of our economy. We're an economy dependent on capital goods, even finished goods that come from abroad. Our world-class capabilities are located specifically almost exclusive in the oil industry, and that is the sector that effectively generates more than 95% of all export revenues, all foreign exchange revenues from our economy, and that is a sector that belongs to the state. It's a public company known as PDVSA, the one that generates what has been known as the oil revenue, which the state redistributes in both society and economy in general, not only by making direct imports and supplying to expenses directly from the state, the government, but it also supplies the state currencies to the private sector, to the private entrepreneurship, to produce, bringing capital goods, assembling factories in the country, developing the productive forces of the country, but historically and unfortunately, it hasn't happened. It's a structural characteristic of particular economic dependence.
Dating back to decades, that means it goes beyond the triumph of a Bolivarian revolution.
No, of course, it has nothing to do with the Bolivarian government. It's historic, it's structural in our economic history. It's our particular dependency. Let's say that private business has taken advantage of the old revenue that has been provided by the state over the decades and has been delivered or sold very cheap, which has been known as overvaluation of the bolivar, which is actually simply selling the dollars that the state generates by selling the oil industry, selling them very cheap to
what
companies.
is known among Venezuelan citizens as the preferential dollar.
Preferential dollar, the oil rentism, more rightly parasitism. Why parasitism? Because instead of leveraging the private sector, those resources it has obtained abundantly over the decades to invest and develop the productive forces, even to innovate and develop capacities of our own science and technology, autonomous, that provides us with sovereignty, that gives us independence. What they have done is to escape the capitals, leave them comfortably deposited in the bank accounts abroad and only one.
For merely personal interests.
For purely personal interests, and only a small portion of that immense cake has really been destined to import some other capital goods, and above all, to maintain a perverse structure of importation of semi-processed goods, an intermediate of consumer goods, raw materials and inputs, parts and components for productions, which makes the national production in quotation marks is not really such, but there are even cases where in more than 90% the total cost structures of production are imported. That is, they depend on important inputs and raw materials. So constantly, that's a perversion, because at the time the state is unable to supply the currencies necessary to provide those inputs of raw materials and semi-elaborated goods for intermediate industrial consumption, as the industries are paralyzed, closing gates of businesses, diminishing their operating capacity of production, and generating the scarcity of goods, because they say, well, the state doesn't give me the currencies, but that's no economy. No state is forced to give any currency to anyone. The economies are private sectors, and business sectors of any healthy economy in the world should be oriented to export and generate with their own investment, their own inventiveness, with their own entrepreneurial capacity, the currencies necessary to continue their operation.
There is to say that the renting system, just as you have explained, that goes back to the decades and has been inherited by the Bolivarian Revolution, has also created a rentier mentality in the Venezuelan trader.
Of course, parasitic as such, as the host who adheres to the plant, the tree, and lives on it, sucking its sap constantly. It is the same. So there are interesting authors, very important thinkers here in Venezuela, as Carlos Lasso, who say that in fact private capital, the formation of private capital in Venezuela, is a state capital, that there is actually no private sector in Venezuela.
It is the state that is holding it.
Because the state is the one that has provided all the capital, then really the only thing that varies is ownership of the property of capital.
Exactly, the legal person.
Exactly. But really who has generated that capital has been the state through the oil industry, and no reason, that's a reality.
However, there are thinkers and economists who have a thought, let's say, based to the right, who consider that the solution to this problem, which is obviously a problem that the country is going through, which would be to detach the state from these sources, from currency generators, an effect known as decentralization. However, we see that the Bolivarian government bets on another alternative.
If you take away the Venezuelan government property, the direct control of the oil revenue, for example, privatizing PDVSA, and that every oil revenue passes to private, here in Venezuela won't develop the productive forces. generating the wealth provided by the state through social redistribution of part of that oil revenue. Why? Because private entrepreneurship, the Creole bourgeois, doesn't have that investor mindset. Even the phenomenon is studied sociologically and economically, is known as private sector investment strike,
Which is translated into?
which is a phenomenon of our history, where the propensity to investing in the Venezuelan private sector is null. In economics, there is an indicator that measures this, which is called the gross fixed capital formation. The gross fixed capital formation is in charge of measuring the levels of productive investment. In the Venezuelan private sector, is practically null, a 1 or 2%, compared with the 98% that makes the gross fixed capital formation through the state directly. So, what's going on? As long as there is this old cake, that generation of income can be distributed to the private sector, and the private sector sees.
And we are talking about the country with the largest number of certified oil reserves worldwide.
Exactly. I mean that we're going to have oil revenue for centuries. And that's a reality which we won't escape. And besides, it's very positive because it has been satanized by the issue of the oil rentism is equal to bad rentism. And it has been mistaken that the rent production is bad. No. That the oil revenue makes us dependent, quite the opposite. The oil industry is the only industry in Venezuela that makes us independent, and that makes Venezuela a country that has a role in the concert of nations on this planet. That's what makes us autonomous, which gives us sovereignty, which gives us independence, autonomy, and a possibility of a huge action ratio is our oil income.
That's why the state cannot get rid of that resource precisely to safeguard the sovereignty.
You can't get rid of that resource, and it's not always, fortunately. Now, what's happening is that obviously that oil revenue, that income from the state's foreign exchange, has declined much recent years, a product not only of the fall in oil prices that has been occurring even though they had a certain recovery. However, this is still not enough, and also as a result of the decrease in production in PDVSA of the volume of production by the levels of divestment in which has incurred, and a series of decisions that were taken in the industry which were totally wrong, and problems that are already public of important cases of corruption that have occurred in the industry and that unfortunately have led to a level of production very diminished in terms of volume, which has this time, with this upturn, a certain recovery of the oil market. If there were a volume of the production like the one that happened a few years ago, we would be in a much more loose financial situation here in the country.
In this context, this economic recovery plan proposed by President Nicolás Maduro comes into effect this August 20th. One of these many sides consists of the strengthening the currency through the sovereign bolivar. How do you explain that to our international audience?
What is sought is that basically the bolivar can be the object of speculative attacks, that its value can be manipulated by external foreign factors to the economic determinants that must govern the determination of the value of a currency. We have been inducing a devaluation of the exchange rate through a reference marker of the exchange rate. There are pages that have been published on the internet, and unfortunately, most of the Venezuelan economic agents opted to the credibility of those pages.
Conveniently.
Conveniently, because the economic rationality of many economic agents in Venezuela ceased to be economic and became of a political ideological rationality, with the mere desire to ruin the Bolivarian government, to get a political defeat of the Bolivarian government. Then, the actions in the economic field are directed according to this political goal. And the economic agents stop thinking exclusively in terms of profitability, business feasibility, business opportunity, minimizing risks, which are the considerations, the variables that an economic agent should take into account up there. But then, that political rationality has made it always seek to destabilize the Bolivarian government. In this case, hitting hard to the economy. And it's a page that gives huge profits to its controllers, to its owners, to those who are behind it, because they manipulate the exchange rate going constantly up and down according to their convenience, making very important arbitration gains, filling their pockets with this speculative gain, but at the same time destroying the national economy, weakening the national economy in a huge measure, and thereby weakening the floor, the social base, which is what is sought at the end of the
Something
Bolivarian
that is not
government.
among the priorities of the managers of these websites, taking into account that it has been discovered that they manage these sites even from outside the country.
That's right, management from outside the country. In my opinion, I have no doubt about it. That is controlled directly by the U.S. State Department. It's a page, in this case, Dollar Today, would also have emerged some others to go complementing the negative action Dollar Today makes. What is the relevance of this package of measures to combat this situation? First, it was already repealed. It is already a fact. The law of exchange rate and its elites, the control of exchange is eliminated for the transactions of currencies between private and individuals in Venezuela.
What is the impact of it?
The impact it has is that, first, it will allow the flow of foreign exchange offers that is being generated by the private sector, specifically by the phenomenon of remittances, that many Venezuelans who have left the country product of this situation are sending their relatives here in Venezuela, and those remittances have an important magnitude, having been estimated by different sources in about $6 billion only for this year 2018, and that is a flow of foreign exchange added to exports of services and goods of small and medium-sized enterprises, from professionals in free exercise, from families and households that have small savings in bank accounts abroad, and who also need to change it periodically to obtain bolivars. So, all this constitutes an important currency flow which, according to the historical levels of the oil income, is not very significant, but for the current situation of Venezuela, it's a very important flow of currencies. That flow, if reflected as a formal and open offer of the exchange market, would stabilize the exchange rate, because it would reveal that the movements would be in terms of daily transactional volume of currencies. And it would be seen that the flow of supply is not enough to meet the demand for those currencies.
In this context, how do the so-called exchange houses operate?
Private exchange houses, and I suppose also that public banking, private banking, will also be authorized exchange agents to be exchange intermediaries, as in any place in the world, to provide the place where people sell and buy the currency. My recommendation is, of course, to democratize as much as possible the activity of exchange brokering in Venezuela. Why? Because now the problem it's going to have is that the demand for foreign exchange, that is, the foreign exchange claimants, will now get the currency in the black market, got it on the black market. Now, when these exchange houses, these exchange agents, if you let the exchange rate activity be concentrated in very few foreign exchange agents of great capital, you are going to form a monopoly on exchange brokering, or an oligopoly, and they are going to have control of the currency supply, and they can withhold, again, subtract the foreign exchange offer, and then the plaintiffs who now get the currency on the black market because they have a relative, because they know someone in the corner, or the merchant at the next corner sells them the currency in terms of black market. They are going to stop getting that currency because they will have to go to a change house that will say, come back tomorrow, come back the day after tomorrow, because I have no currency right now. So to avoid that, you must democratize the activity of exchange intermediation, and that any person can be an exchange broker, any person with a minimum of requirements that meets the legal aspects that are established. In this way, you prevent monopolies or oligopolies in exchange brokering activities. That, for me, is an important variable.
Back to the subject of the national currency, the Bolivar. The new monetary icon enters into effect. The Bolivar Fuerte will be, let's say, coexistent with the sovereign Bolivar. until the first one becomes progressively extinguished when the step enters into effect, as occurs in every country of the world, a change of currency, even as within the national currency itself.
Right. Monetary reconversion is an inevitable necessity. That is, already the figures of our hyperinflation, the accounting figures, are too big. Then you have to reduce zeros to the currency, shortening the monetary scale by a simply accounting and budgetary issue, with an operation of daily transactions, even cash, which is already too short, banknotes and coins, to provide the minimum basic needs of the population. Then you emit the new monetary coin, which of course in isolation has no anti-inflationary effect.
And that's why on more than one occasion we hear, not only by specialists, but also by common people, well, how is this going to solve the issue of hyperinflation?
At this time, that is to say, in this monetary conversion, the difference is that the new sovereign bolivar will be anchored to Petro. The Petro, as all we know, is a crypto-active, a cryptocurrency issued by the Venezuelan state,
at the same time is backed by barrels of oil,
which in turn is backed by the oil wealth, specifically bulk number one in the Ayacucho field of the Orinoco oil belt. Enough oil to guarantee all the emission that so far has been made of Petros and several successive emissions that can be made. Then Petro is going to have that value. In fact, the international community has recognized the Petro value because in the pre-sale and initial offer process, the Petro was sold to the equivalent value of the oil barrel of the Venezuelan basket, and many investors already bought the necessary Petros tokens to realize their investment, and they did it at that price. Then it's a price that is recognized as such, a value that is recognized as such in the market, but at the same time the guarantee, the price support of the barrel of oil, the fact that you go to buy oil in Petros to PDVSA, and PDVSA receive them to that value. You recognize that value. You know that you have a means of payment that has that value. Then there is no way that a page dollar today or Petro today or whatever manipulates that value of Petro. It's impossible. Now when you anchor the sovereign bolivar to Petro, you anchor it by establishing a convertibility value between both currencies. You have to establish an exchange rate between the sovereign bolivar and the Petro. Once this has been done, then you have to understand that the Petro itself is a market that goes beyond the oil market, beyond the market of its backup value. It's a financial asset in itself, and it has its own market with an offer and a demand of its own, because the Petro is going to be freely convertible, most of all now that the law of illicit foreign exchange was eliminated, freely convertible regarding not only to the sovereign bolivar, but to other freely convertible currencies and to other cryptocurrencies. Then obviously a secondary market of Petro is generated, where the Petro is going to be handled according to the supply and demand of Petro, and this had to maintain it, let's say, sustainable. You have to ensure that there is enough Petros offered in that secondary market to satisfy all possible demand in bolivars and other Petros claimants. Then how is this done? That's the moment when the different modalities of instrumentation of Petro enter. It can be done by making successive emissions of Petros, each of them guaranteed against additional blocks of the Orinoco oil belt that is huge enough to withstand many Petros emissions. Or you can do it by allowing the Petro to capitalize in the market and rise of value, that the Petro will become, as has happened with the Bitcoin, with the Ethereum, with the conventional cryptocurrencies that are known that have had very high capitalization curves, where, well, the Bitcoin from dollar cents came even to overcome the barrier of $20,000 per unit last December, or the Ethereum, which is the main cryptocurrency of Russia, which began worth almost $1 and in just 24 months exceeded the barrier of $1,000 per unit. The Petro has guaranteed very important levels of usability, not only as a currency for Venezuelan foreign trade, but also within the Venezuelan internal economy. The Petro has a lot of usability guaranteed. This makes the Petro, in addition to the backup value and the seriousness that it gives to be issued by the state, has much better conditions than the Bitcoin, than those that had the Ethereum, than those that have had any other cryptocurrency to capitalize its value in the secondary market. Therefore, if this capitalization is driven, if a stable coin model is not adapted, that is to say, to try to keep the Petro rather at a stable value, if the Petro is allowed to rise in value freely, the Petro could be worth a lot, hence the insert that aroused this interesting financial instrument in a myriad of international investors in the 5 continents interested in buying the Petro's tokens, because they know that there is a reef, that there is an interesting investment that can generate significant returns in the short term.
Luis Enrique, thank you very much for these explanations. We will be talking for a long time about the Venezuelan economy, but the time always betrays us. However, you've given the essential guidelines for the Telesur audience in English to get a more accurate idea of what is intended with this economic recovery plan imposed by the Bolivarian government. Luis Enrique, thank you very much for this explanation so necessary for the Telesur audience. In a few minutes, you gave a more comprehensive view of what is anticipated with this economic recovery plan that comes into effect from this August the 20th.
Sure, Ray. Thank you for the invitation.
On the plan designed by the Bolivarian government in order to face the economic war in Venezuela, I have talked today with Luis Enrique Gavazut, a researcher in social sciences. This is From Caracas. I am Ray Gomez. Thank you very much.